As I mentioned, one of these side issues with Monday's by-elections was polling. And in fact, we should really say it's the work of one polling firm, and that was Toronto-based Forum Research. And they published, as you heard, several sets of polls during the by-election period and for each riding. And their last published poll for Brandon Sursa, coach, showed the Liberals 29 points ahead. Next door in Provencher, it would also show the Conservatives much farther ahead than the actual finish. So it's sort of a little out of whack in Manitoba. Our pollster David Coletto of Abacus Data was watching all of this. And I guess the first thing is, we're not trying to backseat necessarily in Forum, but give us a sense, why was it only Forum? Why weren't you in there? And why weren't a lot of other pollsters in there? I think that's important to understand as well.
There are a number of reasons. The first is it's relatively expensive to do riding polls because you can't do it online. You need to do it telephone-based. Some pollsters will never do IVR. They don't believe in that methodology.
Interactive voice response.
Which is the automated, which is the way Forum does it. It's very cost-effective. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Cheap way, if you want to put it that way. So that's one of the reasons is it's expensive, and if you don't have a media partner or somebody to do it, you may not see a commercial reason to do it. Whereas on a national stage or a provincial even level, it's a little more reasonable to do, and you get more bang for your buck. But the other reason is not so much in Brandon Sursa. We'll talk about that, I know, in a second. Yeah. But in a riding like Toronto Centre and Bourassa, one of the challenges with polling local, small geographic regions is you can't get at cell phone only households. Those people that don't have a landline, the traditional phone.
There's a lot of people nowadays that don't have a landline.
Upwards of like 40% in a riding like Toronto Centre don't have a landline. So, and so as I had a number of clients who wanted to do polls in that riding, and I said to them, look, I can't do them the way that I should be able to do them. And as a result, that's why I think you didn't see many others do it.
Now, that said, let's take a look, because we have the Toronto Centre Bourassa results, and this is actually where Forum was closest, despite the fact that they would not have been able to poll a bunch of people who don't have landlines. They managed to do not too badly in these two.
And the reason is likely because voters who had a landline and voters who didn't have a landline probably voted in the same proportions. If that happens, then they're just lucky that they got it right in this case. Because if you're missing out on 40% of the electorate and they vote a completely different way than those that you're actually including in your sample, your poll's going to be way off, right? The whole point of a survey is that you get a representative sample of that electorate that's coming out on election day.
Now, let's take a look at the Manitoba ridings, because here is, as I mentioned, missed the Liberal vote, overestimated the Liberal vote in one riding and overestimated the Conservative vote in another one.
Well, one of the problems I think that Forum Research did, and they admitted this, is that they actually did independent samples, they said, over the course of 3 days. So on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, they said they did independent polls, which is why people got called 2 or 3 times or 5 times. I don't know, there's different stories going out there.
5 times, yeah.
And the problem, most pollsters will tell you, you don't do a poll on a single day. And why don't you do that? It's because, for example, on Sunday, the poll that Forum did that showed the Liberals way ahead, maybe people out in the rural areas go to church and they miss the call. And if you're not calling people back on the same day, you're going to miss a complete group of people. So if I just had to assume why maybe their poll was off, is because conservative voters are probably more likely to go to church. If you're calling them Sunday morning between 10 and 1 o'clock, maybe they've gone to church, maybe they go out for lunch afterwards, and they're not going to be home to pick up the phone. And so that those who do and answer the survey might be more likely to vote Liberal. And that's how you can get skews in the results.
In a small, let's say Friday, you don't poll generally on Friday nights, do you? You have to skip on Fridays.
We don't do Friday nights either.
But let's say you could pick a night of the week in a small community. There could be a big Junior A hockey game, and the whole town's out at the junior, so you miss that particular geographic area. All sorts of different numbers. Is there any evidence in all the work you've done? Is there any evidence, because we're having this debate now about should we ban polls during writ periods? I mean, you got it dead on right in Nova Scotia. Is that a reason to say we should keep them? I mean, I think it's silly, but is there any thought out there that yes, voters' behaviors can change if they're exposed to polling results?
Well, the academic literature that there's been researchers that have tried to answer this question. There's no conclusive answer to that. Some evidence suggests there is, that voters are naturally strategic, and so if polling is one source of information, they're going to change their behavior based on that source of information, which is why if a poll is so inaccurate, it could change some people's behavior, like your previous guest mentioned. On the other hand, some voters won't. They'll know, well, the Liberals are going to win, but I'm still a New Democrat and I'm voting that way. So my view is, obviously, I think it's nice for certainly the media to know where the election's going, but I think it's nice for voters to know, because I don't think it's a problem when a voter knows that it's a really close race, which means my vote's going to count more, turnout generally goes up, and a poll can tell us that. If you don't know, voters like information. We like making informed choices, and if the poll's right and they're accurate, this is the problem,
right.
They can be a useful source of information.
And presumably, if people are now saying, and you've heard this, it's your business, that, oh, I don't believe pollsters anymore, well then, let's have more polls, because if you don't believe them anyways, we're not going to affect your behavior if you tend not to trust. The only, I would say in the, last question, on the 2011 election, when it was pretty clear that Michael Ignatieff was not going to win, all the public opinion polls showed that Liberals aren't going anywhere here. And all of a sudden the NDP started to tick, and there was a bit of a snowball. I think a lot of people who were Liberal voters said, oh, look at that, Layton's got some momentum, and he might stop Harper, and they might have jumped on board.
Again, we can never prove this,
yeah.
But I imagine a campaign where there was no polls. Mm-hmm. Would that orange wave have happened? I think that's your suggestion.
Exactly,
if people didn't know that their neighbor was also considering voting for Jack Layton. The polls give us a sense of what our neighbors think about things,
or the flip
what
side
they're planning to do, or what they're not planning to do.
The flip side was there were some people ready to vote Liberal going, oh my God, Jack Layton could be Prime Minister. I'm voting Conservative.
Exactly.
Right? That same idea.
So in the other sense, it could have prevented Jack Layton becoming Prime Minister in a way.
And given Harper his majority. All these interesting possibilities. I love the numbers. David Coletto, thank you so much.
Thanks, David.
All right.